my name is Mylin Calvin. I'm hosting a video show called In My Country, and my first guest today is my beautiful mother. Her name is Sue, and she grew up until she was 13 years old in Saigon, Vietnam, and I'm going to ask her some questions. I've always loved hearing her stories about living in another country, and I just think her stories are interesting, and I hope that you think her stories are interesting too. So my first question is, what was it like when you lived in Vietnam? Because what we probably hear from today versus when you lived there many years ago is very different. So what was Vietnam like when you lived there?
Well, I was 13, and at the time, the country was at war. I live in Saigon, which is the capital of South Vietnam, and we were at war with northern um, Vietnam. So the Vietnamese government is fighting against the South and the North are fighting with each other. And from my understanding, that South Vietnam is in capitalism society, and North Vietnamese are communists. So that's why the fighting started. Um, as far as I could remember, we were probably more the fortunate one because we live in Saigon, which is a big city. It's a capital of South Vietnam where the president lived. And so, kind of like President of the United States live in Washington, D.C., is very guarded and protected. So we can hear bombing and gunfight, but it's not right there in the city. The rural area was more of the, you know, affected with the hardship of witnessing all the fighting and the killing and losing their loved one more so than us right there in Saigon. But my mom was 37 before we left Vietnam, and she said as long as she could remember, there's always war. So people just learn to live like normal, as normal can be. But if I can remember, people, do have fear and anxiety and very certain of tomorrow. So they live, just one day at a time, sort of, don't plan a lot of future. And I think with always a feeling of, hey, a given time, the bomb can drop and we can die and we can lose everything we have. But, life is normal as can be good. People live with it forever or a long time. So we go to work, or I didn't. We'll go into my schooling later, but some people go to school, and there was no internet. So we go to the movie and watch whatever's on TV, kind of like, well, my mom remarried to my dad, who is American, so we watched some mostly American shows. So my brother watched Danny Boone, and I watched Mayberry. I forgot what that show is.
Oh, um, I'm a little young for that.
Okay, I'm a little bit old, so.
So I'm going to jump to a different question because part of your story, so you came from a very large family. There's 6 of you as brother and sisters. And part of your story is that your biological dad died when you were young, and your mom, who's my grandma, was still pregnant with one of your brothers. What was that like? Because as I understand it, Vietnam at the time doesn't have any social programs to help with people. Here in America, we have social security programs, different things to help people when they come on hard times. But as I understand it, Vietnam wasn't like that at the time. So can you tell me a little bit about, that period of time when your dad passed away and your mom, my grandma, had to support a family of, I think it was her and 5 kids at the time. or 4 kids, and she was pregnant with her fifth.
Yeah. I was only 2 years old, so some of this was told to me. So I'm going to just tell you what I, heard and know from, that time on. From what I was told, my dad was, one of the more fortunate one. Most of Vietnamese, that country at the time, and because of war, there's not really a middle class. You either have money or you don't, or you live better or you live poor. We were fortunate because my dad had a skill. He was a silversmith, and he was able to borrow some money and open a small jewelry business. So our life with my dad was, I would say that I would consider us not rich like what you might think rich is, but compared to there, that we are more fortunate than a lot of people. And after he died pretty young. He was only in his early 30 when he died of complication, something to do with the lung. And so, of course, my mom was, have 4 young children and pregnant with one. She was a housewife. And I have to say, my mom is my hero from the story that I hear, because she is probably the strongest woman that I know. I'm sure there's a lot of women that are like that, like her too. But um, she, of course, was a housewife and she doesn't know the skill. So she had to sell the business, and there's debt. So she wanted to pay the debt. I'm so proud of her because she didn't really have to. Some people are very sympathetic with a woman that have 4 young kids and pregnant with one. Some of the lender, was sad and they offered to forgive the loan, but in her mind, and she told us later on that she never wanted any of us to bear the shame of someone else's children saying to us that your father owed my father money. So she took all the money she had from that business and she paid off all the debt. And then she moved us to a rural area because Saigon is a big city and it comes with a big price tag of living. So um, my grandmother also, my mom took care of my grandmother. And the reason I think she's very strong is because she was only 9 years old when she had to start taking care of her mom due to illness or whatever, because her father was not in the pictures. And to tell you a little bit about culture, and it might drag on too long, but my mother was a product of the little wife. Culturally, a lot of men over there have the main wife, and then they sometimes have little wife. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, was the little wife. And so when he passed on, no one took care of them. And so the big wife doesn't like the little wife. So my mom ended up having to start helping take care of my grandmother from the time she was like 9 years old on. And I think that's why she was so strong. She did what she could to make whatever she could and support them. So anyway, we moved to a small rural area. I remember having to walk on this like rice field. And if you can just remember, like us little kids have to walk on like maybe a 2, maybe 1 foot path. And when you grow rice is underneath. You have to fill it up with water and stuff. So there's a little path, and it's kind of like walking in a little square, and there's only like maybe a foot to 2 foot. And then there was like 4 or 5 kids and an old lady and my mom and pregnant, and we're walking through all this little rice field to get to the mainland, so where we could, where some people live. And then I did remember that because maybe when my brother and sister might fell in the rice field, we had to fish them out of it. But anyway, whatever money was left after the debt, my mom built us a little small, I say house, but it's probably more like a hut because it was just wood and there's no siding. And then the wood frame would hold up a roof of some kind of leaf, maybe straw, I'm not sure. And our furniture was consists of like sawhorses and like plywood and whatever blanket or pillow makeshift we have of. That's where we live. And my mom lived there with us until she had my brother. And soon after she was able to, get back to normal physically, she had to, you know, cry and left us because, of course, money was out. So, anyway, my sister Marina was at the time was only either 9 or 10 years old, and in Vietnam, the oldest sister or the oldest brother does have gain a lot of respect. They get the title called Hai, Hai. If you're a sister, then it's Ji. If you're a boy, then it's An. They get a lot of respect from the younger kids, but they also have the burden of having to take care of the younger kids. So my sister had to step up at 10 years old and start helping taking care of my youngest brother, Danny, as an infant. And my mom, my grandmother, I remember she being sick a lot, so she was there as the adult. But I think my sister did a lot of work. My grandma did what she could, of course. And so my mom went back to Saigon because she had to learn some quick trade, and at the time she can learn to be a massage therapist pretty quickly with what she has to work with. So she lived with friends and learned the trade, and that's what she started working, do massages, go into home and things. And she sent us what she could, and she saved what she can. And from that on, she actually saved enough money um, to open a business with cash, along with some of her partners. And then she also met my adopted dad, which is an American, and they got married. And he was a brave man because he had 2 children back in the United States, and he adopted 5 of her kids. So I'm very grateful for my father. His name's William. He gave us opportunity to come to America, and I'm forever grateful for that. So anyway, we all moved, and I don't remember how many years, but I remember maybe there's a picture that me and my brother Mike took together, and I was probably about 7 or 8. So we must have lived in that rural area for I would say maybe 5 years. And then my mom was able to, financially able to bring us all together. During those time, I'm sure it was really sad for everyone. I can't speak for my brother and sister. I don't know what their feeling was, but I remember being kind of like a mama girl more so than others. I don't know. Maybe I was weak, I don't know, but I remember having to cry a lot because I miss my mom. I want my mom at night. And so I remember going to bed crying a lot, missing her. And I'm sure she missed us too. And we only get to see her maybe once a month because it was a long distance from Saigon to where we live. So, but it's just a way of life. We learn to deal with it or live with it because you don't have a choice. I remember having friends. I remember playing, tag, and my brother climbed trees. And I think the funniest thing was, well, maybe I shouldn't go into this, but I think it's so funny. It's always, I remember it. My 2 brothers would climb up, or 3 brother will climb up in the tree after they implanted firecracker in cow poop when they know somebody was going to walk by, and they will blow that up. That's how ornery they were. But it was life for us. And I don't remember feeling sad or feeling deprived. I just feel like we just accepted things and we appreciate what we have and we just go on living.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I assume living in a rural area, you guys had to find your own entertainment, hence the firecrackers.
Yeah, we have to do something. I'm sure we did other things, but that's one of the things I remember the most because I guess as a kid you think that's funny. The adults that got pooped on them probably didn't like that too well.
Right. So, how has living in Vietnam, you came to the US when you were 13. What year was that?
We left Saigon in 1969. I was 13, with only my youngest sister. And my youngest sister, Rose, she was about, I think, 15 to 20 months, somewhere around there. My brother Mike 14, and the reason the rest of them can't come with us was because my older sister got married, and you cannot come with your family unless you're under 18. Another thing that I wanted to say, and it seemed um, so harsh on the men of that country. At 16 years old, you have to take a test to see if you can pass it. If you can pass it, you can continue school and you can stay out of the draft. If you do not pass that test, they will draft you in the service to go fighting. Can you imagine a 16 years old have to be drafted and go? And most of them do. Again, it's because poor, there's a lot of corruption. The wealthy or the more privileged wealthy parents get to buy their way out of it. Um, and sadly enough, the poor one or the one can't afford it end up having to go to the service at 16. Some of them, if they pass the first test, they continue. Then when they're 18 again, they have to take another test. If they cannot pass that, then they have to go to service. If they do, then they get to continue their maybe college, if they're privileged enough to go. So that's really sad. So that's why my brother Richard, he was 16 at the time. He didn't pass his test. We didn't have to. My brother went to the service, and my sister was married, and my youngest brother, he's of age, but the problem was when he was born, he was not documented. His paper was, his birth date was not the same as the adopted paper. So because of that inconsistency there, he was not allowed to leave the country. So my oldest sister, being the oldest sister, took in my brother Danny, and then my kind of look after my brother Richard whenever he come home from the service. So there was only three of us that got to leave America in 1969. Long story short, eventually my sister Marina and her two sons did join us in America, and after the war was over, during the evacuation of the American, my brother and his wife, my brother Richard, my oldest brother Richard, and his wife Michelle was lucky enough to be among some of the evacuees that got to go to America. And my brother Dan eventually got his paper fixed up, and then so he flew by himself at 12 years old from Vietnam all the way to the United States all by himself. And that's the craziness of it too, because I also remember as a child living in Vietnam that my mom packed us all a bag of food, limited clothing and some money. And she told us that, if there was a bomb that hit Saigon or war break out and we were separated, that we need to find shelter and just wait for her until she could find us. Can you imagine having to tell your children that? And then I remember my youngest sister, Rose, was probably just a baby or less than 2 years old because, we didn't leave there until before she was two. So, but nothing of that seemed like it was a big deal because you just learn to live with. It's normal. I'm sure we're not the only one who have to deal with it. Every mother there, every father, they have to tell their children that. But the word war doesn't seem, I mean, it seemed really significant now that I live in the United States for so long, but back then it just normal.
So then how has living in Vietnam, how did it shape how you lived in the US?
You learn to live with hardship a lot easier than, you learn to live without a lot of luxury. So I think, I don't think I have as much hardship living through this quarantine as much as maybe some other people, because, we have to live really hard. We have no luxury. I remember even had to take bath with rain water in a barrel. It was pretty cold. Um, but I think it make you deal with things like I don't need a lot of luxury to live. I can live with a lot less, and so I'm a lot more conservative than a lot of people. I appreciate things more, I think, just because having to go through that, and I feel like we were some of the more lucky ones who lived in Vietnam through the war than other people. But I think you do learn to appreciate things a lot better. Um, then I'm not saying, American, but, of different country. Um, in a way, I feel like it probably helped me be a better person.
Yeah. So as a side note, we're recording this during the COVID-19 pandemic, so we're all in quarantine. We actually live in the same city, but we're not in the same city right now. So that's part of why we're recording this, on the computer. So just as a side note, also like everyone else, my kids are here. So you saw my one of my twins and here comes another one. Um,
And I miss them a lot.
no. Sony, you want to say hi? You want to say hi to Nina?
Hi, Nina.
Hi, baby. I miss you so much.
Miss Nina.
Can't wait to see you. Gonna be 7 more sleep, mommy say.
7 more sleeps. We're trying to do our part and, socially distance for 14 days. So we were already in Florida. So we were in Florida for a week. We're staying here for 14 more days past our planned time. So anyway, to wrap it up, I kind of wanted to ask, like, how has your experience being living in Vietnam and then moving to the US, how has it shaped how you raised your family? So obviously I'm one of your children. We're a blended family, and then but you personally have me, my older brother, and then a younger sister. How has your experience shaped how you raised us?
I want my kids to have a better life than I did. And like I say, I feel fortunate, that even through all that somewhat you might feel like hardship, I feel like my family was more lucky than most. But the way my mom brought us up is that you can work hard and achieve pretty much anything you want if you just keep at it and work hard. So I learned to not want things that I can't afford, because over there's no bank that would loan you money, because it's war. It's the risk too high of getting repaid. So hi kids, I love you. So what you can buy is what you can save up and pay cash for. So I try to live that way a lot. I try to get my children to understand the importance of overextending yourself. My mother always gave us good things in life, items and love. Uh, but she stressed the most of the importance of family, love each other, eat good food, get together. But in material thing, we have good things. I'm not saying we deprive, but we never had an abundance of things. And I try to do that with my kids too. I give them good things, but I don't give them so much that they don't appreciate it. I stress for them to want to be the best that they can be, but have parts in your success, just like college. Of course, we have 5 kids, so it was tough. We couldn't pay for all the college, so my husband and I will pay for half of the college, and the kids will borrow half. And I feel like they're better in the long run because they also have the self pride of helping pay for their education. It makes them work harder. And I always try to stress loving your family, be there for your family. And I feel very lucky. All my children, graduate from college. They work during college. They have a job waiting for them after college. And they're the best they can be. They have good life, and they did mostly on their own. And that's what I was taught. And so I brought that and try to instill that in my children. And I am not bragging, but I think I'm probably one of the luckiest women because all my kids all do well. After they graduate from college, we didn't have to pay any of their bills. My youngest one still complaining about having to pay all of her bill. But she said I should have taught her even harder about paying her bill because she doesn't like it. But she's very responsible. I have one of them, very responsible. They graduated, got job, and took over their bill.
Well, thank
So,
you. I appreciate you. I've heard these stories for many years and I wanted to bring them to other people. So thanks for taking the time to share them on video. Love you.
oh, it's great. Always good to talk to you, honey. Love you. Miss you.
Bye.
Bye.